Thanks for joining us. My name is Anae Augustini. I'm CEO of CID Insurance Programs, and you are here to participate in our latest webinar, Understanding the Nonprofit Business Opportunity. We are lucky enough to have Kristen Hazard. She's with United States Liability Insurance Company, and she's an executive at the company level. I think she's a vice president of the nonprofit department there. We also have Michelle Belden, our CID's nonprofit underwriter, with us as well. So you may hear her chime in from time to time on something that Kristen is discussing. So Kristen's going to be our instructor today. And if we go to the next slide, thank you. So let's talk about the objectives of the webinar. Nonprofits are sort of a mystery to most insurance brokers. So I think it's important to define what a nonprofit is in insurance terms, and then let's look at the different types of nonprofits that are out there that you may not recognize as a nonprofit, and then what kind of coverage does a nonprofit organization need? And then even more, let's look at how to market and sell the right coverage to a nonprofit organization so that you can become a quick study on selling insurance to a nonprofit. So before we get started, let's just do a couple of logistics. All of you will be on mute, and so you will be able to hear but not speak. So it will be important. If you have questions, make sure that you type them into the chat room. If they're not applicable to what Kristen is talking about in the moment, we'll probably answer all of those questions towards the end, and then I'll give you guys a heads up closer to the end that it will be time to go ahead and type in your questions so that you get them typed in prior to the end of the webinar so we can answer. All right, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kristen.
Thank you, Anae. And again, I'm really grateful to be here and have the opportunity to talk about a topic I love. So we'll just, go right into it and start talking about the value and what we see in the nonprofit industry segment. But thank you again for all your time and attention. So with nonprofit organizations, there are so many throughout the country, and just by saying the word nonprofit, it may not necessarily conjure the image of what we're trying to target. But what is a nonprofit, and how can you determine whether an organization is for-profit or nonprofit? There are so many different types that I think that the big thing here is that to recognize their structure really gives them a lot of different exposures, and it kind of creates a unique opportunity. So we'll get back to that in a second. But what is the opportunity? Well, just in sheer numbers, there's over 2.4 million nonprofit entities in the United States that we know of. There are plenty more that are startups. There are plenty more that don't necessarily have to file for their tax-exempt status. So that number could be much greater. Of what we know, about 66% have revenues that are less than $500,000 a year. I bring this point up mainly because when I do say the word nonprofit, a lot of people think from an insurance standpoint, we're going to target the local hospital or the blood bank of the United States or things like that, very, very large organizations. But in fact, most organizations are much smaller. Where that's helpful for all of us is the smaller organizations are the ones that need the advice, they need the assistance, and they're also the ones that not everybody's fighting for. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about these organizations that, even though they're smaller, still have a wide variety of exposure. This segment, though, that in and of itself is one of the fastest growing segments. You compare it to, let's say, contractors or restaurants or manufacturing. You see continued years of growth, about a 5% rate each year. If you look at these other industries, there's ebbs and flows with how economic conditions are. The interesting thing about nonprofits is when times are bad, people turn to nonprofits, and that's when they're most needed. It's also when they are able to get their donations from the wealthier members of our society and do better there, also get funding from the government. When times are better, they can rely on those donations and thrive and expand operations. So we don't see where they're shutting doors as often as some of these other types of industries like contractors and restaurants who are very sensitive to the economy. Now, we were talking about how do you understand what a nonprofit looks like? Why are they structured? Well, most nonprofits do have a board, and that board makes decisions and determines how the nonprofit's going to operate. They create a charter, and those are the guidelines and rules by which that nonprofit is going to operate. They have their mission statement, which helps people to understand where they are trying to impact society. So what's interesting is that can be anything. And so the difficult thing, what looks like on the surface, is trying to find a policy that can address that anything. And what we try to do together, CID and USLI, is find ways to address as much as we possibly can. But as a nonprofit, it's an overwhelming concept that they have so much, they feel like they lack access to coverage, because if they go online to any insurance carrier or agent, even if they searched right now today and they said insurance for nonprofits, it doesn't immediately pop up in a Google search. If they go to a website, they see home, auto, they see commercial, but they don't see nonprofit. So how do they find their coverage? And when they do finally get coverage, there might be gaps, and they're not even aware that their own operations may cause, an issue in the long run. So these are all these things that are flying around. And then at the end of the day, even your most sophisticated nonprofit isn't sure whether or not they're covered. And that first bullet is probably what most of them think about. Like, oh, well, so what if somebody comes on premise and falls? Well, we want to make sure that we can address that. And some understand they have publications or they have speaking engagements, and what happens if they say something erroneous or harmful to somebody else. And others understand, well, they're providing a product. What if people get sick? But what they don't think about are things like special events. They don't think about the allegations of abuse and molestation. They don't think about, the result of an error or omission when they're providing a service. What ultimately can be the impact? From a directors and officers standpoint, that board still doesn't understand that the decisions they make could eventually impact someone in a negative manner and bring legal action. They may not know how to manage funds. There just may be a lot of issues because these are volunteer boards. And finally, employment practices. What if they discriminate? What if they harass someone? It's obviously not intentional, but these are all things that are floating out there in the universe that they're not aware that they need coverage for. So we're able to have that solution for you. So that opportunity is that is a huge abundance of small nonprofits, and they need coverage that's specifically designed for their operations. So what we're providing is a policy form that has up to 8 lines of coverage to address majority of these exposures. And the beauty of it is you only have one application and one underwriter. And in many instances, you can get a quote over the phone, which some of you may be a little shocked by that. It's a little bit unheard of, but yes, you just dial 877-969-7539, and you'll be in touch with one of 45 underwriters who have been trained to handle these operations. And so, or you can go to the website, cidinsurance.com, and we're looking to help you there. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, some of the common classes, because I can tell you there's over 500 different classes of nonprofit that we handle. But here are some of the more common ones, and the ones that you might see in your community. Thing like a church or a temple, in-home caregivers. That's a growing class with seniors wanting to remain independent and staying in their home. Soccer clubs, networking groups. I bet all of us as insurance professionals are involved in some sort of professional trade association or networking group. These are all the different nonprofits that you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that as a nonprofit. But they are out there and they have unique exposures and they need the coverage at a price point that they can afford. The USLI product will address a variety of industry segments or verticals, and this is where we have a specifically designed product that gives the coverage that that specific vertical might need. So just to give a couple examples, if you had, it's spring now, there are sports clubs, starting up. If you look at a little league team, they're going to need coverage for if the players get injured. If parents go crazy, they need assault and battery coverage. They may need abuse and molestation coverage just in case there are allegations of any issues with the coaches and whatnot. So there we have a specific product that'll do that. It can add on equipment coverage and all these different things. On a completely other side of the coin, you might have a fraternal club, something like a VFW, a veterans organization, where it's more like a bar tavern. They have a restaurant, they're serving liquor, they have a dance floor. again, we can cover that property, general liability, liquor with that specific product. So don't get too caught up in this, but I just want to make you aware that there are a variety of segments that we target and have specifically designed products for these nonprofits. Now, I mentioned phone quoting. A majority of our products, so the ones that are featured in blue here, are the ones that you can call in and get a quote online or over the phone. The other two, I strongly encourage you, if you do have questions, to still call that number and see if you can get assistance from an underwriter, because they can be a little bit more confusing. And oftentimes, if we get enough information, we still might be able to get a quote for you over the phone. But other times, we may be able to say, well, you're going to need to get this as your rating basis and get that to CID, and we'll be able to help you. But our goal is to turn this around as quickly as possible so that you can help satisfy the insured's needs and, move about your day. So to talk about a specific segment that has really been growing lately, let's talk about houses of worship. Houses of worship is meant to represent anything from churches to temples to mosques, really a whole scope of just worship organizations. I always like to think about, while I'm driving down the street, what immediately comes to mind? I think about like Starbucks. I think about like the fast food restaurants that I'm passing by. It's funny, if you look at those numbers, they're almost under 100,000 in total, the pizzerias, McDonald's, and coffee shops. But if you look at houses of worship, there's over 350,000 in the United States. So it's really overwhelming. I think most people think that there aren't as many anymore, but it's a growing number. We're seeing over 4,000 brand new churches that are opening their doors every year. And that's just because of trends. People move to different areas. They want to find other people who worship the same way they do, and they form little groups. They start renting space, and boom, you have a church. We see this as the fastest growing as these smaller tenant churches that eventually grow to be able to purchase buildings and build their congregation. But in their initial stages, they really struggle because they don't know where to go. They're always leasing space, so therefore they're required to have insurance in place. And that's really kind of a great just sub-segment and a great opportunity. Now, I'll talk a little bit about appetite, but I do want to make mention of just one thing. With the houses of worship, we've seen, as of January 1, much of our competition making changes in what they're doing. And so there's been non-renewals, there's been rate increases, and it's just something for you to be aware of. This may be the best time now to reach out to the churches in your area and see if they are satisfied or if they're ones that have experienced this issue of non-renewal. You can really be a hero and help them in a very fast and easy way with our product working through CID. So I mentioned earlier that we have a broad appetite with regards to the houses of worship. We can consider any denomination. We can consider storefronts or established churches, really anything on that board. I just always joke that, we're not looking to write the cults that are out there. We don't like brainwashing and we don't like faith healing. So just a heads up, those would fall outside. Now, our product that you can access over the phone is designed for churches up to 30,000 square feet. To let you know, CID does have access to much larger markets for this and can do up to 100,000 square feet and up to 10 million in total insurable value. So there's, I just want to let you know that it can be broader than this. But the value in this product is that we don't have a designated premises endorsement. And so that means we can include special events automatically. Again, reducing steps in the long run, because a lot of these churches may have like a chili bake-off. They might do a garage sale. They might do a car wash to fundraise. We want to make sure that they are covered for those incidental operations. We are able to cover parsonage and additional exposures such as childcare, soup kitchens, maybe overnight retreats, any of those things we can review and evaluate. Some of the benefits is that we can consider any construction type and we can consider anything in PC 1 through 9, and we don't have a restriction on building age, which, as I understand, is a common issue this day and age with these older churches that might be more established. We're able to help facilitate that. We've recently expanded, beyond this, but probably the most impactful areas would be that churches that have international mission trips, we are able to entertain. What we're ideally looking for is those mission trips being incidental and restricted to adult travel. We aren't going to be covering the actual international trip, but we're going to cover the domestic operations. And we want them to have foreign liability insurance in place because that's typically appropriate with an exposure of that size. Similarly, prison ministry has been a growing area that churches tend to get involved in, and it's something we can absolutely entertain. What we'll want, again, is to make sure that it's somewhat incidental to their operations and that their purpose is really to help people get back on their feet. We're not looking for ones who are making political statements or lobbying or involved in activism as a means of their operation. From a coverage standpoint, at its basic level, we're providing property and general liability, including the special events, and handling the crime or employee dishonesty. We have specialized coverage with abuse and molestation, now up to a $1 million limit. If it's not specified what you need, we will provide a 100-300 limit, and that's at no additional charge. And that's really very advantageous for the price-conscious church. We're also able to offer pastoral professional up to $1 million and include the directors and officers in EPL. And from a rating standpoint, these are very simple risks to quote. We just need a description of their operations, provided that if the church has anything other than just worship. We'll need the square footage dedicated to church operations. And then if property is in the mix, we'll need to know the building values, construction type, protection class, that variety of information and what they need covered, as well as from the directors and officers standpoint, we're looking at annual revenues and employee count. Change gears a little bit, but a somewhat related industry group is the social service opportunity. A lot of these will start off as a part of a church operation and eventually split off. Or they may start off from part of a larger organization and split off. We've seen a significant growth in this area as well. A lot of the reasons are because we have an aging population. We have schools that don't have budgets anymore to address extracurricular activities. So a lot of times nonprofits are providing the tutoring, they're providing the science, technology, and math programs. And that's where we're seeing more opportunities: senior services, youth services, and a variety of things like that. Common classes that we see on a day-to-day are here. I could list probably 50 that I know that our product entertains, but there's a lot here. And they tend to have overlapping operations, counseling, as well as childcare, as well as a residential program and things like that. And so we have that ability to be flexible and add additional class codes. That way we can have something that can address all of what they do. And again, I encourage you to call that number if you do have questions, because sometimes these are not easy. They are in the long run, but you just may want some guidance. We'd be happy to provide that. But you see there, animal rescue, group homes, food banks are all examples of classes that we write today. Now, we're differentiating ourselves in a few ways. I think first, we're offering a very low minimum premium. And just to take a quick step back, the houses of worship, the minimum premiums for that, in California, the package minimum premium is about $405, and that's the minimum. And in the remainder of the country, it's $500 for the general liability and $250 for the property. Now, if we look at social service, our minimum premiums in California are about $500, and the rest of the country is about $735. And I'll talk in a minute about what comes with that, because it's a slightly different package than what you get with the churches. With this, you'll see the similarity of that there's no premises limitation, and events are automatically covered as well. We're also providing host liquor, and we can offer blanket additional insured when they need that. Now, probably what's best to kind of share is kind of what we don't do. But again, CID may have options for you, but these would be areas where our product may have some issues. So for-profit residential, we wouldn't be able to do that just yet. Now, if there's counseling and it's not overnight, we do have ability to help there. Adoption, foster care is a harder hazard class, as well as significant international operations. We would be able to cover their domestic. Oh, yes, sorry.
Oh, Kristen, I'm really glad you're raising these points on what's more challenging, what's a more challenging risk. Any of the brokers that are listening in, they can reach out to Michelle Belden the underwriter for this product, and she can point them in the right direction. But go ahead. I mean, I think it's important that we go over the harder to place types of risks.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you. So yeah, anything that you're seeing where it's got a little more hair on it, maybe a little bit more of difficult operations, yes, reach out to Michelle and she'll be able to help outside that. But you can see there that these are, again, just a little bit trickier in regards to nonprofit operation. And then another related class is what we call charities and business associations. And these are just your normal Main Street fundraising foundations, educational organizations. Their goal is they're the ones who are maybe hosting the 5K in your community, and it may be to raise money for breast cancer research. That would be an exact example of what we're targeting here, and I'd call that a fundraising foundation. But you may be involved in a PTA or a booster club. These are the organizations raising money to support the school. The Chamber of Commerce is there to raise awareness of, and promote the town and what it has to offer. So all these different things are low hazard nonprofits, but there are tons of them. They're very easy to find. You can use a resource called guidestar.org. And what guidestar.org, that's www.guidestar.org. What that does is it just houses all of the tax forms, the 990s that nonprofits submit to the IRS. You could search that by zip code and find the ones in your area to target those if you don't already know who's in your area that's doing this type of work. Now, what these organizations typically have are a fundraising exposure. They have meetings, they have events, and they're managing the funds that are being donated to them. So they have actually some pretty significant exposures, even though they tend to be smaller. What we're able to offer is coverage on an admitted business owner's form, and minimum premiums start at $395. With event coverage, that'll bring that up to probably about $500 or more if it's a very significant amount of events. We don't have a premises limitation, again, because we want to be able to be flexible enough to address wherever they're having their meetings. And if they're offering seminars to their membership, we want to automatically cover those as well. The event coverage here, we are able to offer blanket events. We need to know two things in order to do that: how many events they're having annually, and then the single largest in terms of attendees. We can provide that blanket event coverage for up to 2,500 attendees. And the way that works is that our policy form will just list what is considered to be an excluded event. And if you notice there's one of those excluded events, that's a great time, again, to reach out to Michelle and find a solution for that specific event. But this will likely cover about 90% of what they're doing, and possibly 100%, depending upon how sophisticated or active the organization is. We like to pair that blanket additional insured, because if they're in multiple locations, we can essentially just address all of that exposure with one step. And we do automatically provide the host liquor as well, and do not require 501c3 status. So we want them to operate as a not-for-profit, but we don't require proof of that status. Our goal is to make it as easy as possible for you to get a quote on these risks and find a solution. Again, some of the reasons that are for concern for this product, and again, you can reach out to Michelle when you do run into these issues, but credentialing, standard setting, a national trade group, journal publication, these are the kind of things that are very sophisticated for a nonprofit to take on. And then we have a variety of other products, as you remember from that first slide where we showed the different segments we're targeting. And in the interest of time, we really wanted to hit on the broadest ones. But just so you know, there are options for things like community associations, your HOAs and condos. We have abilities to address sports teams, camps, clinics, again, over the phone. We can do arts organizations, so a performing arts theater, an art gallery, the VFWs with the fraternal organizations, Masonic lodges, and all of these products, we can provide an umbrella so you can have those excess limits as well. With that, I want to turn it back over to Ane to kind of address the logistics of how you can get a quote.
Thank you so much, Kristen. You did such a great job. stay on the line. For those of you that are participating in the webinar, if you have any questions, please start typing them in now so that there's enough time for us to actually get your question and answer it while we still have Kristen on the line with us. So, so easy. Michelle can do a great job. Kristen did to cover the fact that many of these small nonprofits can be quoted right over the phone, and it's a limited amount of information that's required. You can go to our website and actually see, if you click on the phone quote button, it will show you the amount of information you would need for a nonprofit in order to get a quote, and there's no application required. So, but if it is a more sophisticated, or you already have an application completed, and it's not, it's from another carrier, no problem. We can quote off of another carrier's application as well. And so, I'm trying to think am I missing anything there, Michelle?
No, if it's a phone quotable, I would definitely encourage you guys to use the phone quote system. It's a great system that we have, and you're instantly getting a quote. And if the underwriter is not able to help you over the phone because the risk is too complicated or you don't have enough information, they'll refer it over to me, and I will get in contact with you as well to follow up with you and get whatever information we need in order to get that quote going for you and make it be able to be bindable for us.
Perfect. So let's look at the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Last thing, if you need to get an application for a more sophisticated risk, those are available under our applications tab on our website. So easy, fillable, really user friendly. So, and if you have any questions on a risk, you can email or call Michelle, and she will be available to assist you. And a couple more things. We will publish this webinar on our site after the event, so you can actually, anybody in your office, or if you'd like to go listen to it again, it will be available. It will be under our resources tab under webinars. It will also be emailing out a broker marketing piece. A couple of them I think we have. One for nonprofit D&O, and I think one for houses of worship, which is one of the biggest products that we write for nonprofit. And those will be fillable, and you'll be able to use those with your clients that you want to market to, or as a cheat sheet when you're making a presentation. And then last, we are going to be doing a survey. You'll get a little notice for a survey, and we'd really appreciate any feedback that you could provide. Let's see if we have any questions. The question is, are you a direct writer, or do you broker to NIAC or Guide 1? We are a direct, USLI is a direct writer. Do you want to elaborate on that, Kristen?
Sure, yeah. All of our products are written on United States liability paper, or Mount Vernon is one of our companies as well. But we do write all of these directly. We've have our own forms, we have our own pricing, and that's kind of how we address that. I would consider NIAC, NIAC, and Guide 1 to be our competition in this space.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, that was it for the questions. So feel free to reach out to Michelle, and Michelle can get in touch with Kristen if there are any additional questions that you think of after the fact, because that's what always happens to me. I think of them later. So anyways, thank you all for joining us, and look on our website for future webinars on different topics that will certainly help you in writing more commercial business. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.